Good morning. Glad to see everybody here on a nice cool morning. At least it's not freezing and the pipes aren't breaking, so that's a good thing. We are at, get my readers on here, Swanee River Water Management District Governing Board meeting and public hearing. We are available on the YouTube link, and it is February 10th at 9 a.m. And if everyone would rise, we'll have our invocation and then our pledge.
Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this day. What a beautiful day in North Florida. Father, we look at your artwork, it's just awing, and we're in amazement of it. Father, I thank you for your grace and your mercy that allows everyone to be here today. I pray for every family represented here today that you see them safely home back to their families. Father, I pray for this board, this staff, for wisdom and guidance in all that we do to protect the natural resources that you've given us. Father, we ask these things in your precious Son's name, Jesus.
Amen. I
pledge
pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, at this time, we'll do roll call. Here.
Here.
Mr. Schwab?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Sessions?
Here.
Mr. Thompson?
Here.
Mr. Lloyd?
Here.
Mr. Wheeler?
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Robin. At this time, are there any amendments or changes to our agenda?
Yes, ma'am, we have one deletion. Business and Community Service Agenda Item 12, Agriculture Cost Share Work Assignment with Beaver Lake LLC, Swanee and Madison Counties. This has been removed from the agenda.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, at this time, we will have public comment. I only have 2 cards up here. If you would prefer to wait until a certain item comes up, let me know. The first card I have is Steve Brown. 26, all righty. And the next card I have is Moses Klepper.
Yes, ma'am. 14581 102nd Path, Live Oak. I'm not, there's one on here that I noticed that I don't know how y'all do here, first time I've ever been here.
Welcome.
Nice room. I enjoyed prayer this morning too, about protecting our natural resources, and that's why I'm here. When I heard this Water First North Florida coming through, I said, well, surely those folks are concerned about where they lived enough, they'll do the right thing. I don't believe y'all have. I've only been somewhat educated on this and started doing research since Thursday when we were, the Republican Party held their little educational event. And so I didn't just stop there, I started reading. And so I'm certain, I hope actually, that I can't say anything here that all of y'all don't know more than what I'm gonna say, because if so, y'all need to go to work. So I just started on this, and I admit my ignorance on a lot of the information, but what I do have is very concerning. I actually spent 39 years in St. Johns County. I left there because of the politics, not necessarily the voters, but some of the elected and appointed bureaucrats and how they sold us out, the people who were sold out. My wife and I searched the literal world for a place to build our retirement home. My wife searched only Florida, and this is probably more information y'all need, but I want y'all to understand I'm not just some weird guy up here and wanting to start trouble. There's at least one of y'all that know me, and I think probably has judgment. He could share with y'all after the fact, but I'm not. I'm here. Old guy, I'm on my way out, and I care. I care for no personal reason. Y'all can't do anything that's going to affect me enough to matter in my personal life. I'm done. 15, 20 years, I'm done. So, but I do care. I want to leave this world better than where it is now. And what little, one drop and it ripples, that's where I'm at. Just to introduce so y'all don't get the wrong idea. But my concerns are, like I said, I spent 39 years in St. Johns County. They sold us out. I had the option, which many of my friends and family don't have the option to do what my wife and I did. We searched a place that we was gonna die at, and Suwannee County became that place. And I won't drag y'all through that whole selection process, but you know, this is where I'm gonna be. So if y'all continue down this path, y'all gonna see me regular. I'm not threatening, I'm just telling you. I get on something and like old snapping turtle, I won't let go till I don't have a choice, cut my head off. So there's no way this is in the best interest to my understanding right now. Yeah, they're gonna minimally poison our land, all right? Well, if you poison the land, folks, at least 20% of all the forever chemicals, at least 20% of all the hormones, at least 20% of all the pharmaceuticals that are in that wastewater, you could call it reclaimed if you want, it's wastewater, is going into our soil, all right? Look, that looks like a good spot right out there. You know, I don't like that. Let them rich folks, let them high dollar property owners dump that stuff over there. Let them, you know, they extract about 120 million gallons of water out of our Florida's aquifer a day. We do about 45. Y'all may know better than me on the exact numbers, but and I know basic science. I got a degree in health science, and I had to study a lot of science. So you put a drop on a big Olympic pool. You put one drop of food color down at the end. You watch where that color goes. It's concentrated down there. Over here in Suwannee County, it's getting very little till it gets over and it's diluted. Well, if they drop it over there, it's the opposite effect. All right, I want it dropped over in Jacksonville. That's where I want it. And the people I contact with, nobody that I associate with, and I've got as my paper said, I'm here representing we the people of North Central Florida, and we're concerned. And the ones that 99% that I speak with are very much like me. We have, not all of them old as me, but they have similar concerns. So let me go through the, actually I pretty much said what I had to say on the JEA. One thing, follow the money. The JEA pushing $400,000 at this project already of a $1 billion startup, 15-year program. I don't know if y'all been paying attention. I look at y'all, none of y'all look like dummies. So I assume you know that $1 billion in 15 years ain't gonna be $1 billion, all right? And so it's a bunch of lawyers and a bunch of really motivated people are pushing this thing to dump it over here. Again, I don't want it. People I associate with don't want it. And I understand there's 3 phases of this. Startup is stage 3. The best time for us to stop it is right now, before stage 2 occurs. So it's already being worked on at the state level, just to let y'all know, to stop this. And I'm gonna do everything I can to help stop it. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other public comments from the room? There being none, we'll close public comment and go to our collective consent agenda. Oh, sorry. Oh, absolutely. Come on up. Sorry I missed you.
I was born and raised in West Florida back in 1955, seen the Cuban Missile Crisis. I was on the island at the time. And interestingly enough, I have come and resettled. I spent 34 years in nuclear submarines, devoted my life to the defense of this country. And ultimately, when I retired, I decided to come back to an area that I spent one summer back when I was a young'un living in South Florida. They shipped me up to White Springs to spend time with the Glover family. But the long story short is, my wife and I have decided to retire here, and we literally live on the Swanee River. We were very fortunate to have found a piece of property on 10th Terrace, and ultimately, I have seen, as a young boy growing up in Key West, I've seen the devastation to the Florida Keys. John Pennekamp, if you're familiar with the name John Pennekamp, was a good friend of my family, very good friend of my family. I've been an advocate, even though I've been away from this area for virtually my whole entire adult life until now. We settled, we've been here for 7 years. My concern is with wastewater being brought in, as Mr. Klepper had mentioned earlier. I am an advocate that we use extreme caution. I mean, look at the Cross Canal, okay, as one example. My beloved Everglades, I grew up in. I've seen devastation and mismanagement throughout the history of Florida. I don't have to mention the history. You all know it. A Land Remembered, a book that, you know, I'm literally using right now to read to school kids, because my wife and I we come to this area where now we're putting back into what was given to me as a young lad. We're helping mentoring school kids, this, that, and the other. But I'm reading that particular story to the young kids, and I consider myself a cracker, even though I've been away for as many years as I have. I have family and friends here who are well-founded generationally, 5, 6 generations. And ultimately, there's small patches of land here that really need to be preserved. And I live on the Swanee River now, plan to solo kayak the whole entire thing as soon as the water level comes back up, which brings me to the point that living on the river, I've seen water levels since I've been here for 6 years diminishing. And I understand hydrology. I've been a cave explorer for well over 20 years. I've cave dived, I've done dye tests, hydrology, flow charts and everything are quite familiar to me. But my involvement in nuclear submarines has brought me to this point. I understand waste. I understand radioactive contamination. And forever chemicals, as Mr. Klepper had mentioned, is a concern of mine, because there are things that obviously can get into our hydrology, and bringing wastewater into our area, which is eventually, hydrology is such, we know that it flows very slowly in our aquifer, but it does eventually bring whatever you put into the ground is going to show its ugly face somewhere else. We're an agricultural-based society right here, and I love this area. I love it. I can't even tell you, grew up in South Florida. I thank God for this area, and I would love to see it stay as close to as it has been for as many years as it has been. But we're seeing changes, and change is inevitable. Agreed? So with that in mind, let's just approach this very cautiously. And as Mr. Klepper mentioned, because I came in late, it is a fact that what you propose as being $1 billion project inevitably is going to skyrocket. And that is just a byproduct of our economy and a lot of times projected, forecast of cost. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming today. Anyone else? I'll look harder this time. All right, we'll go ahead then and close public comment and move on to our collective consent agenda. Everybody had time to take a look at that?
Madam Chair, I'll make the motion that we approve the consent agenda as written.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried. All right, let's see here. Guess we need to do our hydrology report. Good morning.
Morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'd like to present the hydrologic conditions report for January 2026. My thanks this month goes out to Paul Donsky. He sent me this great photo of Little River Spring on the Swanee River. He and the MFL group have been going out to do some site visits on some low water areas around the district, just to kind of see how this lack of rainfall is affecting our groundwater and surface water components. But this photo kind of struck me a little bit when I saw it. Let's get this going here. When I saw it, this is kind of the head spring here. He kind of got a little cut off there, but we're seeing some exposed limestone here. And then as you go down into the spring run itself, you see some exposed land, actually some dry land over here that normally does have water over it. So I thought it was a great photo in the fact that it's very representative of what we're seeing at this point in time with our ongoing drought. And I'd like to thank Paul for sending this over to me again. I think it's a great way for us to start our hydro report for January 2026. Rainfall for January 2026, we had a district-wide average of 1.7 inches, which represents 52% less than that long-term average of 3.7 inches. I did want to mention we did increase our deficit significantly for the past 12 months. At the end of December, we had a deficit of 11.5 inches. That increased to 14.8, and that's based on moving that window of time forward. January 2025, we had 5.1 inches of rainfall, and we only picked up 1.7 inches of rainfall in January of 2026. Taking a look at the map, that 1.5 to 2 inch range in green does encompass the district-wide average for the month. But looking at the map, most of the rainfall kind of occurred in the top 2/3 of the district, with the lower amounts of rainfall, 1 to 1.5 inches in that dark blue and less than 1 inch in that light blue, really kind of occurring more in the southern part of the district. But we did have some of that through the center part, down through Baker, Columbia, down into Taylor and Lafayette counties as well. On the flip side of that, 2 to 2.5 inches in orange, and then 2.5 to 3 inches in red, really kind of up in the northwest and northern part of our district. And we saw some areas of more than 3 inches of rainfall, and that's in that pink color. That stretches from Jefferson through Madison into just a tad bit of Hamilton, and then we also had another spot in Jefferson just right on the boundary of the water management districts there. Our biggest rainfall event for the month was on the 3rd of January. We had a district-wide average of about 0.8 of an inch, which made that about 45% of our rainfall for the month. So out of that 1.7 inches, we got almost 0.8 in this single event on the 3rd of January. Once again, that green does encompass the district-wide average there, but we did have some lower amounts throughout the district, centered here on this map, and also down in the southern part of our district as well. But the higher amounts of rain, the 1 to 1.25 of an inch in orange, and then more than 1.25 of an inch in red, really kind of up in the northern and western part of our district, although we did see some down here in Dixie, Gilchrist, and Alachua counties as well. This is our departure from normal precipitation. This is from January 10th through February 8th. We have two different categories, if you will, of deficit in our district. We have 2 to 3 inches of rainfall deficit in that orange color, and that's mainly over in the eastern, northern, and southern parts of our district. And then we have 3 to 4 inches of rainfall deficit as we go to the western part of our district. So Taylor County, Lafayette County, up into Madison and Jefferson counties, all seeing that red, that 3 to 4 inches of rainfall deficit for the past 30 days. I wanted to show this again. This is our past 13 months. This is actually figure 1 in the hydro report itself, but I thought it was important to take a look at this again. We only, out of the 13 months we had on this graphic here, only 3 months, January, March, and May of 2025, did we beat or did we get more than average rainfall for those months. Every other month was quite a bit below the rainfall average for that particular month. And that average is right here in that dashed line across the middle of the graphic. I did want to point out that even in our wet season, June, July, August, and September, we saw quite a bit below rainfall averages as well. And as I mentioned earlier, January 2025, we had 5.1 inches. When we moved that window of time forward, we only picked up this 1.7 inches. That kind of shows you a little bit on how we did increase our deficit for the past 12 months. Stream flow conditions for January 2026, really to be expected with the little bit of rainfall that we've been getting. A lot of these are either below normal or much below normal. The 10th to 25th percentile is in the orange color. We do see some river gauges that began and ended the month in that. Those include the Econfina, the Osceola Lamont, the Finn Holloway, even up into Lappahat Jennings, Lappahat Statenville, White Springs, and then Fargo all began and ended in the below normal. But we also did have some that either continued the entire month in the less than 10th percentile, which is the much below normal, began and ended that month. So that would be the Santa Fe, Fort White, Worthington Springs, Graham, and New River, even up into Withlacoochee at Panetta and Withlacoochee at Quitman on the 1st and the 31st of January showed much below normal, the less than 10th percentile of flows for those river gauges. This is the Upper Florida and aquifer levels. This is the end of December 2025. I wanted to show this to compare with what we had in January. But what we were seeing first of all, what we were seeing in December, we saw some more wells that were trending upward, and that's due to a little bit closer to average rainfall that we had in December. But we were starting to see some expansion of that 10th to 25th percentile well levels, and that's pretty much all through the district. But we do see quite a few areas of 25th to 75th, but kind of separated by this orange color. We did also have about 9 wells that were below 10th percentile, and those include wells in Jefferson County, Madison County, Lafayette County, Dixie County, Gilchrist County, Levy County, and up into Columbia County, all in those red colors with the levels below the 10th percentile. Fast forward 1 month, we really do see an expansion of that 10th to 25th percentile in orange, kind of filling in the gaps, if you will. A lot of those wells that were in the 25th to 75th percentile last month are now in that 10th to 25th percentile, so they're falling a little bit as far as the end of January goes. Do still see some areas or some wells that are in that normal range, the 25th to 75th percentile in that blue color throughout the district. And we did have 10 wells this time that were in the below 10th percentile. And those include wells in Madison County, Lafayette County, Dixie, Gilchrist, up into Columbia. And Levy County actually had a couple wells, one of which was outside of our district, that showed below 10th percentile in that red color on the map. I wanted to show this. This is our district-wide Upper Florida and aquifer conditions. This is the percentiles that I usually give at the board meetings. I showed this last month, but I went back and took a look at some of the older reports and kind of pulled those numbers out and graphed those. So now this graphic, which originally began in 2016, now goes back to 2011. We did collect this on a monthly time step up into a certain point. Now we do it weekly. That's why we have a lot more dots there toward the end of that graphic. But some areas to point out here. This past Saturday, we were down to the 20.4%, so roughly the 20th percentile of well levels for this past Saturday. We started to take a really good look at things when we reached about the 40th percentile, and that was about September of 2025. That's when we really started getting concerned that we're starting to see things drop as they have at this point. But back in 2017, about this time in 2017, we had 34.5. This was right before Hurricane Irma came through in late 2017. And the lowest that we got prior to Hurricane Irma was on the 4th of June of 2017, and that was 27.2. So we're quite a bit below now where we were right before Hurricane Irma went through. However, something to point out, back in May of 2012, we were at the 1%. This was right before Tropical Storm Debbie, or Debbie number 1, came through. And you can see what Debbie did. We had roughly 18 inches of rain for that month, and it really put us up to about the 65th percentile from the first percentile. So just kind of giving a good idea of where we are now compared with where we were in the past couple of dry times. This is our U.S. Drought Monitor. This was released last Thursday, February 5th. We do have a couple categories here. We've got severe drought just in a few of our counties along the coast here, but mostly we have extreme drought, that D3 category. And this is an increase from the last week. Last week's update was, or week before last update, we only had a couple spots here and then one here, but they've gone through and connected these now, so we've got a lot more extreme drought in our district. I do look for this to expand quite a bit when this comes out this week. I think I've seen some of the preliminary stuff, and it looks like it's going to stretch down into Taylor County, and I think it's going all the way over to the coast as well. I did want to mention we are still in a La Nina advisory, and that is expected to continue at least until March or so, when we have about a 75% chance of switching over into the El Nino Southern Oscillation neutral conditions. That prediction will be updated this coming Thursday, so we'll kind of see where we are on that. But the hope is that we go from this La Nina, which is more of a dry time in our area, to not quite having those impediments on our rainfall. So fingers will be crossed that we can maybe get some more rainfall after that switch over. With that said, however, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's seasonal outlook for February through April does have us listed with below normal rainfall probabilities, and it's about a 40 to 50% chance of leaning below rainfall probabilities for our area. And also, as far as temperature goes for the next 3 months, February through April does have us at about a 50 to 60% chance of above normal temperatures. I know it doesn't really seem like it from this past week, or past couple weeks actually, but as far as going through April of this year, it does look like we are to go above normal as far as temperatures are concerned. All right, with that, the January 2026 summary, we had a rainfall amount of 1.7 inches, which represented 52% lower than that 1932 to 2025 average of 3.7 inches. We did increase our deficit, as I mentioned, moving that window of time forward. We went from 11.5 inches to 14.8 inches at the end of January. District-wide upper Florida and aquifer levels did fall from the 24th percentile in December to the 22nd at the end of January, and that's based on a median level decrease across our monitored wells of about 0.3 of a foot. And as of this past Saturday, our groundwater is now down to the 20th percentile, so we've lost about 2% since the end of January. As I mentioned, La Nina conditions are persisting, and we do expect a switch over to the El Nino Southern Oscillation neutral conditions sometime between January and March, or sometime by March, and that's coming at about a 75% chance of occurrence. And finally, severe drought, extreme drought exists throughout the district. It's actually more extreme drought that we're seeing than severe drought, and I do look for an increase in that at the latest update this Thursday for the U.S. Drought Monitor. But that represented a significant increase from the extreme drought across the district since the week before's update. So it just seems to be going a little bit more extreme as we go without rain in our district. With that, Madam Chair, I'll take any questions that the board may have.
Any questions from the board? And we're just all praying for rain.
Yes, ma'am.
Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, no questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam
Barb.
Chair.
I think we do have some property agencies here today. Would you like to introduce? Okay. Okay. Okay, wonderful. We'll be glad to hear from you on item 26 then. And we have some service recognitions. Okay. Wonderful.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. As you said, I'm Kelly Woolley, Human Resource Manager. I'd like to present the board with 2 service recognitions for this month. First of which is congratulations to Dr. Amy Brown for 10 years of service. Amy is a Deputy Executive Director of the Water Resources Division. She is responsible for implementation and coordination of the district's program and projects related to water resource monitoring, minimum flows and minimum water levels, groundwater modeling, and water supply planning. Since joining the district, Amy has participated in development of the 2017 and 2023 North Florida Regional Water Supply Plans, the 2018 Water Supply Assessment, the 2024 Western Water Supply Plan, the implementation of the North Florida Southeast Georgia Groundwater Model, and the finalization of the update to the Lower Santa Fe and Ichetucknee River minimum flows. She currently focuses on developing quality data sets and processes to support district decision-making, as well as assisting with regional project development within the North Florida Partnership area. Thank you, Amy, for 10 years of service.
Amy, your plate's been full, hasn't it? Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Dr. Brown.
I was really nervous about reading all of the things that Amy has done since
My
she's gotten
goodness.
here, so
Yes.
thank you for that, Grace. Oh, my goodness. Also, congratulations to Kevin Jones for 10 years of service. Kevin serves as the district's water resource representative in the Office of Water Use Services. Kevin began his career with the district as a hydrologic data collection specialist before taking on the responsibility of water well construction inspector in 2021. In this role, Kevin helps protect groundwater resources through oversight of well construction standards. In 2025, he further expanded his qualifications by earning his water well contractor's license. Thank you, Kevin, for 10 years of district service. Thank you.
Thank you. Tell you what, we are so blessed with staff and the knowledge that they bring to us, and we certainly appreciate the 10 years of service. Thank you very much for supporting the district.
Thanks.
All righty, let's see here. Mr. Tom, do you have anything for us today? Okay. Did you dock us time today?
We need to dock some
Okay,
time.
I was just checking. I know you keep up with that very closely.
Pam, are you observing those billable hours? Okay, just want to make sure that we're good on that. Thank you.
Oh, dear. All right, Mr. Tim.
So, Madam Chair, members of the board, those in attendance, good morning. And thank you to the citizens that have joined us this morning to give their comments and express their concerns. And as Kelly has just recognized the service of our employees, I think it's appropriate to you just to say thank you for the service that y'all provide and the leadership that you provide as our board. So for business and community services, you'll find items number 9 through 18 on this morning's agenda, with item number 12 having been pulled. Item number 10, 11, 13, 14, 15, and 18, those items were approved by way of consent agenda, so thank you for those approvals. Item number 9 is our monthly facilities update, and this will be given by the Office of Administration Chief, Mr. Ben Glass. And then items number 16 and 17 are informational items, but Mr. Leroy Marshall is with us if you have any questions on them. Yeah.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Quick update for you today, all good news. The project in the office building across the way is progressing on time and on budget. The crew is finishing up their first round of an internal punch list, and we're going to deliver them our final punch list at the end of the week. And that should wrap up that project. The next step in updating facilities around here, we're going to look at this building we're sitting in. First step will be foundation stabilization. We've got some floor buckling and some cracks in the walls. We want to make sure we get that addressed before we move forward with any other components of renovating the building. So happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Just a comment. It looks good, man.
Thank
you. Looks really good.
Thank you.
How's the baby?
Baby's doing really well, really well. Had a doctor's appointment last week. She's 11 and a half pounds.
That's great.
Moving right
Excellent.
along.
That's
And
right.
We made it home for Christmas, made it home December 20th.
You guys did good.
So, thank you.
Any questions for Ben? Okay, thank you, and it
Thank
does
you.
look good.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tim. Caitlin? Oh, and you are so Valentine, I missed that today.
I thought she was volunteering at the hospital afterwards.
Madam Chair, if I may, before Caitlin gets started, too, today is her birthday. I won't say which
Happy
one.
birthday!
Oh, happy, would you like for us to sing to you?
No.
Okay.
Maybe at lunch. How about
Okay.
at lunch?
We can do that.
Yes, yes. So today is the big 4-0. I'll say it. If you won't. Yes.
Man!
Yes, so I'm excited to be here, excited to be presenting on my birthday, and got celebrated by 3 of my favorite fellas this morning. So feel very loved and appreciated, and again, happy to be here.
Well, they say that 40 is the new 20.
It's 20 times 2, so
There you go, that's right.
I'm feeling great, feeling great. All right, so the Division of Outreach and Operations, we have 10 items for your consideration today. Items number 19, 23, and 27 are for informational purposes. I will note that on your land acquisition and review memorandum, that activity report, there's a note on the Hodges property about activities that we had started. That is a clerical error because that item is being brought to you today. So again, that's just a clerical error, and hopefully we'll update that for March and it'll be true, but as of today, that item is before you, and just note that clerical error. Item number 20 will be presented by Troy Roberts, our Chief of Communication. Items number 21, 22, and 24, you approved on consent, which we appreciate very much. Items number 20 and 25, and 26, I'll be presenting, and then we will close out our division section with item number 28, which will be presented by Lorna Radcliffe, our Chief of Land Management. As Troy makes his way up to the podium to get started, I did want to follow up on an item that the board had asked about several months ago regarding memorandums of agreement and cooperative agreements and performance with those partners. And did we have the language that we needed to satisfy the district's best interests regarding performance where we share management with other agencies? Lorna did a full review of those agreements, and we are happy to report that we do have language in all of our agreements that allows the district to cancel that agreement if performance is not what we want. Some of it is written stronger than others, and as these agreements come before the board for amendments or renewals, we're updating it to the stronger language. But in short, we wanted y'all to know that the district's covered and your best interests are protected. So with that, we'll hand it over to Troy.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Thank you for the two items that were approved on consent this morning. And then I have an informational item for you, and then I have another informational update for you as well. So we'll start with the one that is on screen now. It's the 2026 Consolidated Annual Report. Every year by March 1st, the water management districts are required to submit their consolidated annual reports pursuant to Section 373.036 Florida statutes. This report is submitted to a whole bunch of people, including the governor, president of the Senate, speaker of the House of Representatives, Office of Economic and Demographic Research, secretary of the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, state and county legislators, and the public. The report includes the following plans, several of which require governing board approval, as indicated with an asterisk. Strategic plan and annual work plan, which was again approved on consent. The MFL's priority list and schedule, 5-year capital improvements plan, alternative water supply, 5-year water body, or 5-year water resource development work program, the water body grades, the Florida Forever 5-year work plan, which was approved on consent, and the mitigation donation annual report. This plan is available on our website, and as stated, it will be submitted to Tallahassee by March 1st. So do y'all have any questions about the plan, report, or any of that schedule?
Questions from the board? Thank you.
Thank you. The next item is based on the request that we received and some guidance from you at our last governing board meeting. We have enhanced both our outreach for the water shortage advisory and for Water First North Florida. In addition to the email that I sent last week giving you an update on where we are with that, we are continuing to go full throttle through the month of February. Water shortage advisory, we have been, in addition to utilizing social media, we've been using PSAs on all of our local radio stations, plus Spotify. So people are well aware of our water shortage advisory that we have right now, and if that changes in the future, if we are required to go to another phase, we'll continue to push that information out there and ensure that everybody knows exactly what that means, and encourage them to conserve water all possible times. With Water First North Florida, we're kind of doing a combo effort with our outreach, letting people know about the water shortage advisory and also informing them about Water First North Florida, in addition to social media and press releases and media interviews that we've been doing. We have been doing our best to get in front of as many groups as possible. I've done 4 meetings over the course of the past week. Over the next 6 weeks, I have another 14 scheduled. So I'm very busy and in front of a lot of people, but this also means that gives us ample opportunities to highlight this project and the water shortage advisory and do our best to educate people about the developments there. So, do you have any questions?
Question, Minister.
Yes, sir. Oh,
Troy, are we receiving a lot of phone calls from the public on the proposed pipeline?
In terms of phone calls, we're getting a few, and a lot of times it is people who are just curious about, I think I get more calls on the water shortage advisory right now than I'm getting for Water First North Florida. And so, we're answering that as best we can, and we're, telling people, look, this is an advisory. We are encouraging you to reduce water. There could be additional phases down the road, but right now this is where we are, and it's just kind of an educational awareness program of our current drought conditions, and we encourage everybody to pray for rain as well.
No, I get it. Yeah, I would think the attention would be on the drought right now, but just curious about the education, how much information we're getting out on this proposed project, because it seems to be a lot of misconceptions floating around and stuff.
So for the project itself, yes, sir. You are correct. There has been a lot of misinformation about it, and we're doing our best to put out the factual evidence that we have. And again, I think getting in front of as many groups as possible, and if the more people that understand it, the more questions that they may be able to answer as well, especially in terms of our local county leaderships and, even some of our civic organizations. I've got a number of Rotary clubs on our agenda over the course of the next 5 or 6 weeks. And, that's local business owners who are very active in the community. So again, the more people that we can make aware of this project and help them better understand exactly what it is and the process and the timeline, I think that makes, this project stronger as we move forward.
Well, we appreciate your effort. I know your hands are full, and if we can help, let us know.
Well, this is probably a question that you may have to get some help from somebody else to answer, but when you look at our historical groundwater levels, we're at 20 now. I know that we've dropped like 2% in the last 10 days. On an assumption basis, if you multiplied that times 4 weeks, it'd be 8% in a month. But we're still a long way from that 1% level we were in 2012. Was there a secondary or an additional advisory or any kind of enforcement requirement prior to 2012? I mean, after 2012, did we do anything in 2017?
Madam Chair. In 17, it was an advisory. It was what we were in now, which is advising people of dry conditions and asking them to take discretionary action. Now, back in 2012, there were regulatory measures that were looked at that time. And again, our groundwater conditions changed rapidly shortly after that decision was made in a way that made that enforcement window very small. But the last time there was a regulatory water shortage was in 2012. The last time that there was an advisory prior to this one was that timeframe right before Irma in 2017.
Well, and I'm optimistic that the good Lord's going to give us some rainfall and things are going to change. But my concern is that we roll over into March and say we're at, heaven forbid, we're in the 10th, 12th, 15th percentile, and our ag partners all of a sudden fire up and are trying to grow crops, and they're at a bigger withdrawal rate than what we are now, that number could rapidly escalate and get down to that number. I know that in 2012 and in 2017, we were later in the year when these low-level numbers were. We weren't in that springtime drawdown time. So just voicing my concerns is all. And I know that you're probably getting some of the same questions when you have your, presentations, and communication's the key, though. We just got to keep letting them know that it is a serious situation, and hopefully it doesn't get there, but it could get a lot worse.
Madam Chair? Yes, sir. And, you know, we understand there's no one method to reach everybody and, you know, help them to better understand. I think everybody knows that we haven't gotten a lot of rain over the last, 6 months or so. But I don't know if they necessarily know, hey, these are the conditions we're facing, and, this is what we saw in 2016, 2017, this is what we saw in 2011, 2012. And so that's part of, us getting out there in front of them, as many of them as we can, to, say, hey, this is where we are. We really have to be careful, and encourage everybody. I get a lot of calls from residents that are saying, well, we don't feel like we should have to reduce our water use because it's our water. And, I try to encourage them and say, listen, this is a shared responsibility for a shared issue that we have right now. So we're asking, our residents, our visitors, our businesses, our, producers, our larger water users to all restrict, or not restrict, but to reduce their water use. And so, if we can all work together as best as we can on this, we can conserve water and, again, keep hoping for rain in the next couple of weeks. That'll maybe not drought busting rain, but, at least enough that we'll feel confident and, see some progress there.
Well, everybody's got to be able to do their little part. My wife's not real happy, but we've turned all our irrigation off, so.
Every
we're
drop
trying.
counts. Every drop counts.
Madam Chair, if I could, to get to the point that Mr. Thompson has made with that, and I'll call on Robbie, as far as our status goes in the time of the drought in 2012. I know we've done some analysis on that, but do you recall what the groundwater percentiles were at in like January of 12 timeframe? I think we had
could you pull up my
that way back,
hydro-
or we can defer till the workshop
That's
this
fine with me.
afternoon, or
that
today.
was just
We've got a workshop to discuss this.
comment.
It's an interesting question, because the other drought was bad after the drawdown, and we're pretty bad going into the drawdown.
Madam
Well,
Chair?
one of the things that,
I guess, Robbie, while you're up here, I noticed the last page of the hydrologic conditions report's got some information on 5 wells that have longer-term data. Would you mind maybe speaking on that a little bit?
Sure. I mean,
My apologies, Troy.
Madam Chair, if I could address the first question. So back in 2012, I'd say early 2012, so this was June, let's get my arrows back up here. So this was May of 2012. So early 2012, we were hovering around, I'd say anywhere from the 5th percentile down to the 1st percentile. So 2012 itself was just really, really dry up until, not Irma, but Debbie, the first Debbie came through. And then once that happened, the next 2 months put us up into about the 65th, 63rd percentile. So hopefully that answers a little bit of that question. And as far as these,
Probably, what month is that?
I'm sorry?
In 2012? What month? So we have a,
Madam Chair? This is May of 2012 here. This is the lowest one, that 1st percentile there.
all right.
And any of the other ones before that are going to be the previous months. We collected these on a monthly time step for the reports, and then since about 2016, late 2016, early 2017, we've been doing this on a weekly basis. So that's why you have a lot more dots there at the end. Madam Chair, could I address the second question? You were looking at the figure 12B, is that
Yes.
correct? Is there something specific you'd like to know about that?
No, there's data that goes back, some of the, as we look at these slides and try to gain a perspective on where were we at different times. This was shared, and I guess maybe this has been here before and I haven't noticed, but it certainly goes back a lot further than 10 years. A lot of these are 50, 60 years worth of data, and I don't know.
Yes, sir, that's correct. This is a typical one that I put in there each month. These are some of our longest term wells, and a lot of these go back to the 50s, like I said, 50s and 60s. There's the DOT Lake City well goes back to 1940s. So we put these in here for more trends, like long-term trends versus what you're seeing just in groundwater here. So you can kind of get a little bit of a better idea how these are scattered throughout our district. and how the trends have been since the beginning of their, I guess, data collection efforts in there. I like these graphs. Unfortunately, they get a little squeezed sometimes, so it's a little tough to see. But you can see a lot of these have been down, have had a trend going down, but some actually seem to recover a little bit. I know the DOT Lake City well for a while there was an issue up until about 2012, up to 2016, where there was a concern that it was on a decline. But it really looks like it's kind of bounced back a little bit over the past decade plus. So just, it's interesting to see some of these with the little bit of trends that you can kind of imagine through the data sets themselves.
Thanks, Robbie. No, I think it's, as we get questions of what are our conditions relative to where they've been in the past, it's, it can make a big difference kind of what we look at. I mean, there's a lot going on and trying to get our heads around this whole project.
Absolutely.
But certainly, it doesn't change the fact that we need to conserve water. We've got a flow going through, and it's very low right now.
Sure. Yes, sir. Agreed. All right, thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, any other questions? All right.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Robbie.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the board, the next item that the Division of OPS has for you is on OPS page 11. This is your consideration of Resolution 2026-01 for the acquisition of a conservation easement from the Hodges family over 734 acres located in Levy County for $698,250 and an additional amount of $30,000 for final due diligence and closing cost. In March 2023, the district received an offer from the Hodges family to sell a conservation easement on their property in Levy County. In October of 2025, the governing board approved staff's recommendation for the ranked acquisition projects in accordance with established water resource criteria to prioritize negotiations. The Hodges project was ranked number 4 on that list. I will note that the other 3 projects, 1 through 3, the districts either committed those funds or couldn't agree to negotiations. So we've addressed those top 3 ranked projects, and we've now reached number 4. The district and sellers have negotiated and agreed to terms of the conservation easement. The easement prohibits future development of any kind, including limits on water wells, utility, septic, and other structures. The sellers are permitted to continue hunting, which is the active activity, which is the primary activity out there right now. Passive recreation and silviculture in accordance with best management practices. I will note that silviculture on this track is very, very limited. This is almost 100% wetlands, and so this, what you're seeing in forest cover is hardwoods, not pine trees here. Once the easement terms were negotiated, an appraisal was ordered to determine the value of the easement. The appraised value of the easement was $735,000. An offer of 95% of the appraised value totaling $698,250 or $951.29 per acre was offered and accepted by the sellers. The final purchase price is subject to the final surveyed acres at $951.29. Upon approval of the resolution, the governing board authorizes the executive director to enter into a purchase agreement with the sellers for the established offered in terms, which are listed above. Further, a baseline documentation report, environmental site assessment, and legal survey sketch will be completed prior to closing. The sale is subject to a clear title, and final due diligence costs are estimated not to exceed $30,000. And with that, staff recommend approval of Resolution 2026-01. And on the screen here is a map of the property. The yellow portion you see is excluded from the easement. There are small camp-like hunting camp structures on that yellow portion. And for the purposes of the easement, we excluded that because the footprint was small and it was not part of the district's water resource criteria. The hatched areas around this property are existing easements that you can see here that the district has held for some time. With that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Questions from the board?
Madam Chair, I make a motion, we approve purchase of the easement.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried.
Thank you very much, Board. We'll let the Hodges know, and we'll continue on and keep you updated on that acquisition. The next item that we have is OPS page 15, and Madam Chair, I think you may have some public comment for this item.
Would you like to come up before we get started? That way we can get you on the dais.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Board. I'm excited to be here this morning. Excuse me. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak towards this project. Just a short, brief, kind of how we got here. The City of Lake City has been working in conjunction with Columbia County on some economic development projects. We've been at this for quite a while now. The North Florida Mega Industrial Park is one of them that we've recently put a wastewater facility in. The City of Lake City is operating that. We have it up and running now. The county had secured funds to build a water plant in conjunction and discussions with the powers that be. We talked about the possibility of the city being the providers to lessen the footprint from an environmental standpoint, to only have one water provider in the area. The county was gracious enough to go and ask to reallocate their funds, which they were allowed to do, to install a water main to feed the mega industrial park for the purpose of economic development. That water main was originally designed to run out the front of our property down to Timber Wolf and go around, basically the long way, if you will. We had the opportunity to meet with several engineers, including the county's engineer, and we talked about the location of the water lines and how it would best serve. One of the things that we noted right off geographically is the water line being placed on the front of the property. If it run around Timberwolf, will be more to the north side, which would require extensions of service lines to the back of the property. So we looked again with our water plant director, Mike Osborne, and talked about the possibility of running down the current wellfield line. That was a very viable source. Obviously, the Water Management District owns the property around us, so we talked about possibly easements. I want to thank Mr. Thomas and Ms. Parter for coming to us and talking to us in our meeting about the logistics. There was the possibility of maybe a land acquisition, a conveyance of the property that we have. That is very appealing to the City of Lake City because we currently have the well fields on the property. For one, to be able to protect our well field. For two, to be able to support the economic development. So that was something that was really on our radar right out of the gate. We got very excited about the opportunity to do that. Another huge asset to that is the ability to do some more land acquisitions and the purchase of a piece of property on Country Club Road. And the amount we discussed was $157,250. At this point in time, the City of Lake City is postured to write that check and purchase that property from you guys. Our main interest in that piece of property is recharge. We don't have a lot of opportunity to do recharge in our area. As you well know, the City of Lake City is not getting a lot bigger. So with the ability to have this in front of us, it again supports economic development by being able to look at our consumptive use permit. We have reached out to some of our engineers, Jones Edmond, and asked about what that kind of looks like on the horizon. Nothing that we would do today or tomorrow, but we did want to get that in play. And they have let us know that there is some positive feedback because its geographical location to Alligator Lake. I have reached out to Chad Williams at the county. He is also in favor of working with us. We have discussed the possibility of some permitting requirements. The city, again, is ready to take care of all of the paperwork as far as that goes. And then one other caveat is this would obviously align us in a position to annex property in the mega site. We would be contiguous at that point. So as an overall business model, it really fits in good with the City of Lake City. We have reached out to Weyerhaeuser. I did ask them through Mr. Kraus at the county, is here to support us, for a letter of support if they were in favor. I believe that was presented in your packets. So all in all, we have got a positive, really super positive feedback on this project. And we really, really look forward to it. And again, I thank you for letting me come up and speak to it. And we welcome any questions.
I appreciate the history. That was very helpful. And
Yes, ma'am.
do you have any questions from the board coming up? Sounds like it's a win-win situation.
It really is. It's not often that everything aligns. Some of the people in the room that we have spoke to said, wow, this one makes sense. It's right on target. So like I say, we're very excited to be here and thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Would anyone else like to come up and speak on this item? Hey.
Madam Chair.
Uh-huh.
I know that David Kraus is in the room. Is the county in support of this project?
I'm David Kraus, County Manager for Columbia County. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Yes, in fact, we've been working very closely with the city on this project. We feel this particular route has the least impact on the environment because it's the most direct route. It goes along existing forestry roads, so there's not any clearing and all that sort of stuff that goes with it. So we're very supportive of it, and the water line to us is essential. It just makes more sense to us. And again, building a separate water plant, duplicating those efforts, again, is not environmentally friendly either. And just financially and environmentally, it makes the most sense.
Sounds good.
Thank you. I thought that would be your answer, but I wanted to make sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I make the motion, we approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That concludes my items. Lorna Radcliffe is going to present the final item for the Division of OPS.
Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Governing Board. I'll be presenting item number 28 today. The district manages properties suitable for river access by commercial operations and other uses. Utilization of the district properties for commercial operations must be competitively bid pursuant to Water Resource Chapter 373, Lease of Lands or Interest in Land, Section 93 of Florida statutes. Leases are also covered in our 40B9 rule and our governing board directive. On December 12th, 2025, the district released an invitation to bid 2526-004 for the Swanee River access site leases on Swanee Springs Park, Matera Springs, Woods Ferry, Blue Sink, and Swift Creek tracts that are in Swanee and Hamilton counties. A total of 6 sites were offered, with 2 being on Matera Springs. The invitation to bid required a minimum bid of $100 per site per year and allowed for multiple vendors to be awarded per site. The responsive bidders for the lease were American Canoe Adventures, bidding on 3 sites, and Bither Outfitters, LLC, doing business as Swanee River Outpost, bidding on 5 sites. Each company bid the minimum of $100 per site per year. Pursuant to Florida statute, a notice of intent to lease was published in the newspaper in the counties in which the land is situated for 3 consecutive weeks, starting December 10th, December 17th, and December 24th of 2025. The lease terms are consistent with other district-held leases. The lease will be for a 3-year term ending in 2029. Staff continue to actively evaluate additional tracts that may be suitable for lease opportunities. The recommendation today is to authorize the executive director to lease district land access to commercial vendors for the Swanee River access site leases on Swanee Springs Park, Matera Springs, Woods Ferry, Blue Sink, and Swift Creek. The vendors are American Canoe Adventures and Bither Outfitters, LLC, doing business as Swanee River Outpost.
Question, Madam Chair. Are these vendors people we've worked with before, and what is their maintenance record? Do they take care of the properties?
Madam Chair? Yes, sir. They have done business in our community for decades, and they do take care of our lands, but we are now actually conducting the leases.
Okay.
Purpose of,
I had a
Madam
quick-
Chair?
Go ahead.
And the purpose of the leases is just to tidy things up, so there's a contractual agreement between the two parties and gives us more options if something does go awry.
Madam Chair? Yes, sir, we're following statute and rule by commercial vendors doing a lease.
Did I understand there were two bidders? And do they share any of the locations?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, any other questions?
Make the motion that we approve.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried. Thank you.
And thank you all. I do have one more item for informational purposes, and that is a friendly reminder that we will be holding our annual land management review March the 4th at Holton Creek Tract. And it's representative of our Upper Swanee region, and we hope to see you there. It's a short 30-minute drive through God's country to get there.
Thank you, ma'am.
That concludes our items, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Brown.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. For Water Resources Division, I just have a few brief updates here, and then I will be back for the workshop at the end of the meeting. So we have been hearing from some permittees. They are receiving the notifications of the water shortage advisory. At this point, it has been an opportunity to clean up some administrative issues, especially for some of the longer-term permits, and we're getting some calls for clarification. But thus far, I think those have been relatively well-received. In terms of the lower Santa Fe and Ichetucknee, the rule has been taken up by both the House and the Senate, and will be continuing to support DEP with information and data as they work their way through the process as it relates to that rule and ratification. And then we are continuing active outreach, as Troy has already mentioned, on regional projects, and I really appreciate the efforts that Troy's put into getting information out there. We're also coordinating with our partners and trying to make sure that we're having good information and good coordination. We're still in the contracting phase for that siting study that's going on. And so as we get more information and data on the phases, we'll bring that also back to the board for their information, so they have that. Happy to take any questions. Otherwise, I'll be back for the workshop.
All right, that sounds good. Any questions at this time?
I'll see you in a few minutes.
Yeah, we'll see you in a few minutes. That's
Thank
right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Brown.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Board.
Good morning.
Appreciate y'all being here today. Good to see Mr. Richard back, and welcome him back, and yourself as well, Chair. That you're doing better with it. Just a couple of items. I think we'll have time this morning to do our workshop that Amy was just speaking to. But Tyler Winburn is in Tallahassee with session underway. You should be getting a report relative to the progress of bills that are relative to the district business. You should be getting updates from him on those as they proceed. And he is monitoring, as Amy mentioned, the Lower Santa Fe and Ichetucknee rule that the Department of Environmental Protection has submitted. And so he is monitoring that and will keep us updated, and you should be able to keep an update on that as it makes its way through with it. I do want to commend the chair. She has completed her confirmation meetings with it. The full Senate approved her confirmation, which is actually for this year, it's a little early, which is great to get it out of the way. It typically occurs towards the latter part of the session. But the Senate went ahead and took that up, and she passed with flying colors. So she's in good company with that. And I do want to iterate to the board, and I know that you all can appreciate it, but I do appreciate the longevity of staff that we have here with that, as we celebrated 2 staff members today. With it, it is, as you all know, it's challenging to keep that institutional knowledge around, and be able to have that. And staff, I want to commend staff from the standpoint, one, of being engaged with the district, but particularly now, and Troy is certainly leading a lot of this effort, but a number of our staff are involved in our outreach effort going forward. Relative, we have a number of fronts right now. We have a drought that's here. We have a Lower Santa Fe and Ichetuckney minimum flow and minimum water level rule in partnership with DEP and St. John's that's being adopted. And it's kind of interesting over at least my history of involvement with MFL development in here. This is one of the first times that we've actually been in a drought whenever we were doing outreach relative to an MFL. In past times, a lot of it has been whenever the rivers were not in as low a condition, or they were even flooded. So it helps with the awareness and the messaging to say, this is why we set MFLs, to try and address conditions when we do potentially get into a drought and going forward, and the duration of that lower water level with it. We do have a workshop today, as Amy mentioned, relative to our drought conditions, a little more information on that, and then review of our water shortage phases, if we need to go forward with those in the future. Based upon that, we're not looking for a confirmation from the board or vote as to moving to a next phase today, but it's primarily just to educate the board relative to where we're at and what steps forward might look like if we do have to go to another level with that. That would be taken up in a future meeting. And with that, Madam Chair, I think that's my report for today, unless the board has questions.
Any questions for Hugh at this time? None. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you all for your support on the items today.
All right, yes, sir. All right, it looks like that wraps up our board meeting. Is there a motion?
I have one.
Oh, yes.
One comment.
Okay, please.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Hugh, and yeah, I guess this goes back to staff and maybe even some of the comments that were made publicly this morning. I know that we've got a big deal coming with the project that we're working on with JEA and Clay Electric and the rest of them. And what I'm concerned about is the more public does research on it, where they're getting their information from, what constitutes wastewater, what's in that wastewater. How does the geology actually work as a filter to, in the wetland project? And I was wondering if maybe we can charge a couple of our engineers and geologists to maybe put white paper together and publish it. Because what I'm concerned with is where is the public getting their information from? Are they getting maybe some skewed or biased information that's not accurate? There's so many news stories out there today that you can read, and lo and behold, another 10 days goes by and a whole narrative is changed. And what I would love to see from our scientists and our geologists, the professionals that get paid to do the research, and also our partners like GRU that already have these wetlands established and how they're working, how the hydrology works for what they're doing down in the Alachua County area. I'd love to have like a whole compiled information ready to go on our website, going through Troy's department and outreach, to where we can actually get sound scientific data in the hands of the public and make sure that folks know that we're not putting medical waste in the aquifer.
Point noted, Mr. Richard, with that, and we have had those internal discussions as well. And our partners have actually produced some partners in this particular case, GRU and JEA, relative to the Water First project, have produced some informational videos that we are utilizing, and they've offered them for public use from an educational standpoint with that. But certainly the messaging from our district professionals and experts in geology and the hydrology in our area. And that is going to be part of our outreach relative to this project as well.
Well, I'm wholeheartedly appreciate the videos and everything else, but the issue that I personally have is it's hard to tell today what's real out there. As far as videos and AI and everything else that is out there. I mean, I'm watching people dance around that aren't supposed to be doing that, or even equipment and other things. But all that being said is I'd like to have notated documents where these are the footnotes of actual scientific data to where people can say, this is truth. You follow what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
We have the notation backing it up. Because what I don't want is a bunch of half-truths or biased applied information out there presented to people, and they make a point to be, I'm against this or I'm for this. I mean, we have such a tribal mentality in our country today, and we don't need to be that way. We need to be straight down the line, truth-based, and be able to have the documentation and the footnotes to back it up. This is scientific and this is actual. I mean, I've, in the last 10 years, or the last 5 years, we've seen quote-unquote scientific data and it not be accurate. I trust our professionals. I trust the professionals at DEP and other folks that we've been working with as our partners for a long time. And I know that we can get some good data out of it, and I'd love to have it where people can put their hands on that data and say, okay, this is footnoted, this is where it came from, because people aren't just satisfied with just a video today. They're doing deep dives, and they're going in, and sometimes they're chasing rabbits down a rabbit hole that are being purposely misdirected. And we got to get ahead of the message, not so much the messaging, but the truth.
Yes, sir.
The truth sets you free.
Absolutely.
And it's so important to remember that. And that's what I want to be about, whatever's honorable, true, and right. That's what my personal philosophy is, and I think the rest of the board sits that away, and our staff sits that away. I don't know and we have a duty, an obligation to put the truth out there in a way that the public can say, okay, I can see that this is truth, and use logic behind it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I agree with you.
Madam Chair, I think one thing that would really be better if to define the fact that we are not pumping wastewater back into the aquifer. That's not correct. So that seems to be an alarming term that gets people wound up, which it would me too. Water going back in the aquifer will be as drinking water standards as I understand.
Mm-hmm.
So that's actually not true, that wastewater will be going back into the aquifer. So
You're absolutely correct on that, Mr. Wheeler.
I think the district's done a decent job, at least in the last 30 days, of communicating some of the stuff. But to Richard's point, the scientific data that supports the statements that are made in the the materials that we're putting out is probably where the rubber's going to meet the road, so to speak. If we get that data and we can communicate that data to the public, then they have a confidence level that, yes, what we're saying is true.
Sure, come on up.
Obviously didn't, Still Moses Klepper, I didn't clarify. The people I'm speaking with aren't thinking it's straight out of the sewer pipe. We know it's reclaimed water. The point is, at least 20% of the forever chemicals, at least 20% of all the toxic stuff that goes into the waste system is going to wind up in our soil, all right? And whatever winds up in our soil eventually winds up in our water. It won't be in none of our lifetimes, but I care about the future. And I believe y'all do too, just being in here and listening and watching y'all this morning. I respect everyone that's spoken so far. So that's our whole thing. And I spoke to a medical doctor, a retired medical doctor who's very active in our community, and last night on this issue, and she was the one that most, of course, the forever chemicals, but when you get in concentrated areas, the use of pharmaceuticals are become necessary to sustain, just living life on life's terms. So you got more concentrated, and she has science behind this. The concentrated areas, such as Jacksonville, they use more drugs than we do, all right, on average. And so their wastewater, even the reclaimed water, has a higher concentration than the water that Suwannee County produces. So again, the people I'm communicating with, we're not misunderstanding what is actually going to wind up in our ground. We realize that it's reclaimed and the process going on with it.
Thank you.
All right, any other board comments, questions at this time?
Adjourn, may I clarify a recommendation was made on the Lake City Welfare Resolution, please?
We did, I thought, yes, we had correct. That is correct. Yes, ma'am. All right. Any other comments?
Well, I got one,
right.
Madam Chair, I got one comment. So we went way up in our water usage the last few days, or way up in our deficit, but it was a double-sided sword. The freeze got us, so everybody was dripping all their water, and that's why we had a lot more water used in the last few weeks, and I believe it's what affected our hydrology report. That's all I got to say.
Been an unusual long period of freeze, so this has been devastating, yes.
People dripped a lot of water.
All right, is there a motion to?
Make that motion, Madam Chair.
Adjourn. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion passed. All right, let's see. Why don't we take a 10-minute break and come back for our workshop? We're running a little bit over, but we had, good information going on here. So at this point in time, we are going to start our workshop, and it is February 10th and 2026, and it is on the drought conditions and review of the district's water shortage options.
Good morning again, Madam Chair, members of the board. So what I have here are slides. These slides are mostly talking about what's going on statewide, what our rules are, what types of advisory or regulatory restrictions have been contemplated in other areas. If we do want to look back at the data, we also have Robbie's presentation from this morning available where we can look back at some of those conditions again if we choose to do that. So in terms of where we are statewide, the Suwannee District, of course, in January, we approved a water shortage advisory that was, again, seeking voluntary reductions in water use. Northwest is bringing forward a similar recommendation at this board meeting in their district, what they would be phrasing as a water shortage warning, again, a non-regulatory ask for voluntary reductions in water use. St. John's is presenting a recommendation for a Phase 1 water shortage for the 4 partnership counties, including Duval County. Those, again, same thing, seeking voluntary reductions in water use. And then Southwest Florida has now approved a modified Phase 2 water shortage district-wide. That does include some regulatory measures, so I'll talk a little bit about those measures that are in place in South. And again, this is just reviewing from our rule that guides the water shortage process for the Suwannee District, and there's broad similarities throughout the state in terms of each district has its own rule on water shortage. They have many of the same elements. So typically, there's a warning, advisory, or Phase 1 water shortage that is the first tier, again, seeking voluntary actions and also giving the regulated public time to prepare in the event that there is a more severe restriction that is required in the future. The Phase 2 is where you start to see a mix of voluntary and regulatory measures seeking to reduce demand, and those voluntary and regulatory measures increase in urgency of request as you move into higher phases of water shortage down to the water shortage emergency. So in terms of the components of the declarations that we're seeing statewide, again, reducing and deferring water use to conserve water to the maximum extent possible, putting together a proactive plan for an extended severe drought and the potential that additional mandatory water use restrictions could come, reducing landscape irrigation to the maximum extent practical, and then making sure that you, as especially for permitted users who have conservation plans as a requirement of their permit, that they have ensured they're fully implementing those conservation plans and that they're reducing or deferring all discretionary use associated with their operation. So if you look at the Southwest Florida Water Management District and where they have moved to in a Phase 2 advisory, they are maintaining at 1 day per week lawn watering district-wide. Now, if we take no action in March, based on the change from standard time to savings time, we will move into a 2 day per week irrigation schedule. What Southwest has decided to do based on the conditions in their district is to maintain the recommendation for irrigation for no more than 1 day per week, all the way through July. They are encouraging low-volume watering of plants and shrubs, and there are fewer restrictions on the timing of that low-volume application to those plants and shrubs. They're limiting the timeframes and additional water that you can use for the establishment of new plants. They're preventing homeowner associations from requiring increased water use to meet aesthetic standards, thinking of pressure washing drives, putting specific plantings in. At this point, HOAs are requested to defer that, again, until you have conditions where the hydrologic conditions improve. Requires the use of a hose with a shutoff nozzle if you are doing the hand watering. Limits on aesthetic and discretionary uses of water. Limits on the timing and frequency of irrigation for landscape and recreation. And then also limits on timing of agriculture irrigation, in that case using overhead sprinkler or a less efficient delivery method. If we think of what a Phase 2 advisory could look like and what components we might look at in the Suwannee District if we decided to move to a Phase 2, we would certainly continue the advisory recommendations for all of our user classes to voluntarily reduce water use and defer intensive activities. We would also potentially be looking at limiting the timing and frequency of landscape, recreation, and commercial irrigation. certainly encouraging the implementation of low-volume irrigation for plants and gardens, maybe even asking people to turn off their automatic timers, because again, even once a week, irrigation may not be necessary at this point in time to maintain the grass, perhaps not in their optimal state, but to just maintain it until such time as we get out of the drought. Also to defer plantings, or if you need to plant, then limit the establishment of new plants to no more than 30 minutes of irrigation and between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. Again, trying to minimize evaporation or loss of water that would be associated with use during the peak sunlight hours. Also implementing low-volume irrigation technologies for plants and gardens, and also advising people to prepare for the potential restrictions on high-volume systems if conditions do not improve. We would be encouraging permittees, again, to continue to review their conservation plans and defer those non-essential uses. Encouraging people to conserve energy. Energy does consume water if you think of the cooling and those processes. Limiting water-intensive cleaning activities for those that are necessary for maintenance, safety, and hygiene. And then also engaging with our commercial, industrial, institutional permittees to review their water use, review their processes, and discuss what potentially might be necessary if we move to a higher phase. So not a phase 2, but as we move into a phase 3, then we may be asking for changes for them temporarily until such time as conditions improve. In terms of potential regulatory components that we could be looking at, again, restricting the timing of agricultural irrigation using high pressure or less efficient irrigation methods, restricting the frequency of landscape irrigation to no more than 1 day per week through daylight savings time, and limit the time of day to those times when you would minimize evaporative losses, limiting the watering establishment of new lawns, new plants to no more than 3 days per week. And again, as was done in Southwest, we could consider a prohibition on HOAs requiring increased water use to meet aesthetic standards. Some of the considerations that we need to be kind of mindful of if we consider moving into a regulatory phase. We do have, again, a procedure, and I'll highlight the steps that are in that procedure on an upcoming slide. But we would certainly need to be giving notice that there would be a hearing. We would have to be contemplating the staffing and field verification that would occur if there are formal notices of violation. We would still want to focus predominantly on outreach and education as a way to resolve water shortage violations, because again, that's the most effective way, is to seek voluntary actions and voluntary reductions. Most of our municipalities have committed to assisting us with the water shortage in terms of their rules and guidance, and so we would be looking to cities and counties to help them with education and potentially enforcement. We would need to be continuing monitoring drought conditions, and we would need to decide whether that advisory or whether the conditions we're looking at are something that we would want to have a fixed time that we would remain in place. As an example, in Southwest, again, they have put their 1 day per week and those other regulatory restrictions in place going through July. At any time, the board can certainly step in and remove that if the conditions improve, but they're planning that unless conditions improve, they would maintain their rule through July. So thinking of duration and whether it would be fixed or whether we would set some condition that we're looking for or some threshold for improvement. And so again, this is going back to the rules that guide us if we move into a regulatory phase in terms of the things that we need to contemplate as a board and as a district. That would be the source of the water supply experiencing the shortage, the relative impact of the categories of water users on the water body, the availability and practicality of alternative sources, the relative economic impacts that restrictions are likely to have on each category of user. And again, we're guided to distribute the burden of the restrictions equitably among water users relative to their impact on the sources experiencing the shortage, the potential for serious harm to natural systems, the water shortage plans of the local governments, and again, most of them have committed to assist us and follow our guidance as it relates to water shortage. The geographic scope, and again, in this case, we're looking at a district-wide condition of drought, but that's not always the case. We could have a system that came through and provided water to one part of our district, but not to another. The effectiveness of the restriction in terms of reducing water use and protecting the relevant water supply source, and the impact of water use reduction methods and means on public health, safety, and welfare. So in terms of the declaration process that would be followed, again, it's defined both in statute and in our district rules. We would be required to do a public hearing. So there would be noticing of that hearing, and it would allow the public, the regulated public, to come and provide information on any proposed rules that we looked at. We would have a series of notifications that we would need to do of local elected officials, law enforcement, and then the permittees themselves, if there's any changes that affect their permit. We would also be required to notice publicly the first week of the shortage each day, and then once a week thereafter, as long as we're in any kind of regulatory water shortage. And again, we become effective after the board approval and would remain in effect, again, either for a date certain or until it's rescinded by the board. So that's just some general information on the process. We've looked at the data earlier with Robbie, and we can certainly look back at that data right now. But this is just to inform you of what it looks like. Again, we have one district that is our neighbor that has moved into a regulatory phase, focusing again still predominantly on landscape irrigation and maybe some less efficient irrigation systems. The other two neighbors that we have are currently in an advisory as we are asking for voluntary reductions. And one of the reasons to have this conversation at this board meeting is, in the absence of a change in our rules, we would be moving from 1 day a week irrigation to 2 day a week irrigation, the way that we have it set up district-wide, if we take no action in March. And with that, I can move to any of the data slides again or answer any questions on this information.
Madam Chair. Amy, I spoke to Robbie at the break, but I want to come back to what Larry said during the meeting as far as the timing of the drought. And any disaster, timing's critical. So the droughts in the past have been later in the year after the spring drawdowns and heavy usage. Now, we're facing a historic event where we're approaching extreme drought before the drawdown and the heavy usage. What is our forecast? What are we perceiving? These restrictions could advance very fast. Has the potential, anyway.
Yes, sir.
Are we prepared to move that quickly? Just questions. It just seems like we're in uncharted water, so where are we predicting, or where are we viewing forward at this point?
So Tyler, if you could switch over to that percentile map that Robbie had pulled up during Troy's.
It was my understanding, Charlie, when we were in that discussion, and he went back and he showed us in 2012, we did have lower levels in the months preceding the date was May.
The date, but I can't tell what that
Yeah.
left at
Well,
that much time.
if you go back to.
That's back to 11, I guess.
So in
Yeah, if you
2000
go back to, all the way back to the beginning of the year, they were at 10%. We're still at 20.
Right,
So based on that question and his explanation of it, I became more comfortable with our current situation than I was up to that point. But, I mean, it's still a very valid point that we don't really know how much draw this is, our ag producers are gonna tap on the system
Yeah.
in the spring.
That's back to 11, then that was pretty low even before the spring drawdown.
So the point that is, I didn't realize that dot would stay there in perpetuity, but that red dot that I have now put on there is April of 2011. So between April, May, and then into June of 11, you are seeing a drop from something that is above where we are to something that is below where we are, 2
So
months.
is this a
2
very
months
similar
down.
situation to what we're in now then?
I would need to look and remind myself of the
I mean,
monthly.
if that was April and it kept going down through
Yes,
the
sir.
summer, that means we didn't have much hurricane activity probably.
Not until Debbie came in 12. And so,
And then
so you did
back
have in this
12.
situation that we're looking at in 11 and 12, and I'll have to remind myself of the rain. And this, the other thing that this illustrates, and the totality of this record illustrates, is that, again, when we think of people using our aquifer, especially for agricultural purposes, they're doing supplemental irrigation. So to the extent that you get rainfall that is sufficient to meet the needs of the crops during that early part of the growing season, there's relatively modest water use that would be associated because you're getting your supplemental irrigation from rainfall. And in the absence of that rainfall, especially in the next several months, you could see a relatively steep drop in groundwater percentiles because it's not just agricultural water use, right? It would also be the natural systems that are coming out of, I mean, because they froze, especially with the hard freeze that we had, you know, there really has been a step back in what the natural system is taking up in terms of plants and trees and all of that. You're going to start to see that come up as well as you see the supplemental irrigation demands. And so in the absence of supplemental rainfall, you can see relatively steep drops. And I think we've observed some of that over here. Oops, I forgot about these. So, oops.
I would find it hard to believe, Dr. Brown, that in 2012, there was substantial rainfall. Just looking at the numbers continue to go down. But if we did have data that said we got average rainfall in those months, and it still took the 18 inches of Debbie to get us to recovery, then that would be a concerning thing to me as well.
Yeah, and I can look back at we do have the monthly rainfall information that takes us through that growing season that we can look at in more detail to just, again, refresh what can happen. And again, the problem is we don't have going forward in time a picture of what is going to happen in the next 3 months. And that's where the fact that we have this forecast of potentially below average rainfall coupled with above average temperatures as you move into the growing season does suggest there could potentially be an increased demand, again, not just from people, but also from the natural systems that would be kind of coming back from this cold snap that we had and starting to grow for the next growing season.
Based on Robbie's forecast, if we stay in the La Nina through May, I think was, if I recall, I think that's what he said, then we've got to assume that rainfall is going to be below average.
That's what is being forecast, is below average rainfall. But again, there's below average, 1 inch below. There's below average, not getting
Zero,
anything or getting very little. And that the rate of drop that you might see, or the rate of change that you might see would be different between those two. But we can look at the monthly rainfall conditions that existed back, working our way, going even back to the start of 2011 and then 2012. Certainly, we have seen, even going back further than this, we don't have it plotted here, but if you think back to the drought in the 2000s also, especially when you get back-to-back years of rainfall deficit, that's when you really start to see the influence on the natural systems. We have annual rainfall here in the slide deck, but we don't have the monthly, and that's something that we can pull and look at in more detail. So what this is this is the historical rainfall. This is just going back to 1996, and it's district-wide, and it's the average rainfall conditions that we've seen for a year. And so, for example, you can see that 2012, kind of in the middle there, although we think of it as the wrong button. As we think of 2012 as being a dry year here, but in fact, in terms of annual average, because Debbie came through mid-year, it ended up being above average. You can see that in 2011 had a 47 inches relative to the 53 that is the long-term average. For 2025, we were at 43 inches district-wide average. So it was dry last year, and again, when you have back-to-back low rainfall conditions, you do start to see some stress to the aquifer system.
If you take that 18 inches from Debbie out of 61, then you're back down in the 40s.
Yes, sir.
2 years back to back. And, we're not far from there now.
Madam Chair, and Amy, the 43 inches at the very end, that represents 25?
Yes, sir. That is 2025 calendar year. 25 was 43 inches. Eighth driest on record.
We're not likely to have an event like Debbie. I mean, some say that was a 500-year event.
But we had another 500-year event in '23.
I do think it is common for Florida to have tropical events that provide a substantial amount of rainfall, and especially in this area, we have certainly seen that the recharge coming from tropical events can dramatically change our aquifer levels. So that is something that could happen. The problem is we don't know the timing of it, and we don't know the magnitude of it at this point.
Under normal conditions, is there an estimate of time for recovery in the aquifer? Say, taking out Debbie, that, we can't really look at that one, but normal rainfall, over a period of time. Obviously, it takes quite a while for that to make a difference in the aquifer.
It is challenging to look at, and it is challenging in Florida. I think normal rainfall conditions in Florida do include some very intense rain events that can be concentrated around certain timeframes, and then can also have times as the ones that we're in right now, where you are substantially below average, and especially in a district where the water is discharging, you can see these levels come down relatively quickly. And one of the reasons why up until this last month, you saw Branford, you had, well, I can go back to that graphic. This graphic that Robbie was sharing earlier, and I know even as of last month, between Ellaville and Branford, we were still showing Branford in the light blue or normal category there, and a lot of that had to do with the spring flow that is coming into our river system from Ellaville down through that reach. Although we are seeing that some of our springs at this point are dry, there are other springs that are still putting out a fair amount of water, and so I think we said the pickup between Ellaville and Branford, there's still 1,300 CFS of gain that we're getting between the Ellaville gauge and the Branford gauge, and that is mostly spring flow, groundwater flow coming into the river system. So in addition to whatever we use, because we are a naturally discharging district, there is water that is coming out of those springs at the same time. That is also, again, sustaining our river system, sustaining our natural systems, but it's also going to be drawing the aquifer down in the absence of recharge to maintain those levels.
What point does the aquifer level need to get to the point that those springs stop flowing?
It would depend on the system. So like I said, I think some of them, I've heard reports that some of them, like maybe Royal Spring, are not flowing right now. But then there are other springs, Lafayette Blue and others that are still discharging. And so some of it's going to be the local conditions that head in the aquifer, like locally relative to that, that would be dictating which springs are or are not flowing. But the level would be different for each spring, depending on, and some of them are kind of higher up in the aquifer, some might be deep Floridan sourced. So there is going to be some variability on when or what level would trigger a spring to stop flowing.
Yeah, I haven't been there, but somebody was telling me that had recently been to Rock Bluff, said that it was basically just a trickle running out now. It basically almost quit flowing. But, and that's at 20, we're at 20%. If we get to 0 or get to 1, I got to imagine that it's got to be a lot less than that. That
And
a lot of the springs will stop flowing.
Right. And I think if we think back to where we were a year ago, or I guess a little bit less than a year ago when we dropped below the median, but we'd had above average aquifer conditions kind of district-wide for a sustained period. And so you're seeing that, and you're seeing that in the fact that we have some of this sustained spring flow, even in the, very, very below average rainfall that we've gotten for this last year. But I think that's the piece that we're wrestling with is, again, without the certainty of foresight in terms of how much rainfall we're going to get as we move into the growing season, at what point do you potentially move to a more, to a regulatory phase versus continuing to seek people to discretion? And again, most of the benefit is going to come from people who are taking discretionary action to reduce their water use. But there would be the question then as to whether we want to, again, in terms of as it relates to the 1 day per week irrigation and some of those limits on landscape irrigation, do we want to start to cut back on that and some of the less efficient irrigation proactively? Or do we wait a little bit longer to see whether we're getting the supplemental rainfall that we need to maintain? And again, keeping in mind at this point that we would need substantial recharge to actually recover the aquifer back to the median at this point.
Yeah, back to my comment, or half question, half comment, but if the springs are empty in the aquifer to some degree right now,
Yes.
without any recharge, but at some point, it's got to get down to a point where we still have drawable water for resources, but the spring's dry, meaning they're no longer siphoning off of the aquifer or running, coming out at a rapid rate. So that would slow down a lot, the drawdown. I mean, once you get down to what we consider the bare minimum of, I guess, zero, there's still water there that's usable by the public and ag to, produce a certain amount of water. I'm just trying to wrap my head around the fact that hopefully at some point it's not just a steep dive, it dives down and it kind of levels off, so it's not just gonna draw us down to nothing.
Madam Chair, if I could add to the discussion as well. During the 2012 timeframe, 11 and 12, that drought that we were in, and I was working with the Department of Ag here, based out of this office at that time, but, we received a number of calls, the district did, relative to residential wells going dry, essentially. And when you think about it, residential wells, are typically shallower than an agricultural irrigation well, to that point. And so with that, to date, some of our monitoring wells, I'm being told, the district's monitoring wells, which in some cases are considerably shallow, depending on your perspective with it. But some of our monitoring wells have gone dry. I'm not aware, and we got David here who would probably field those calls. I'm not aware of any residential wells being reported going dry yet.
David King at Water Use Service. We've got the normal phone calls of my pump has gone bad. We've checked them and nothing's panned out to be because of water levels. They've been faulty systems and things like that.
And to that point, in 2012, Post Springs, over on the Alachua-Gilchrist line, on the eastern side of Gilchrist there, Post Springs got to a point, and I don't remember at what time during that drought, but Post Springs got to a point where it ceased to flow, similar to what you're expressing about Rock Bluff. I don't recall what happened with Rock Bluff at that time frame, but Poe did cease to flow at that point.
Yeah, there's a lot of things. I think back on it now that I didn't, it's out of sight, out of mind, so to speak. You're busy and you're running around, you're doing things that are important in your life, you think, and you don't go check springs. I mean, I would be more apt to do that today because I'm involved with the district, but I know that water levels were low and there was a lot of fires and, a lot of things that happen when drought occurs. Hopefully, like I said earlier, hopefully the good Lord will send us some rainfall and this will, take care of itself. But if not, we will obviously have to do some things to try to curb it.
Do we have a list of what we would feel like would be non-essential water use, basically irrigation, lawns,
Sorry, Tyler, can you-
artificial stuff, car washes, things that, don't grow food, that we would consider limitation on those items?
Tyler, can you switch to that other presentation? This doesn't go as deep into your question in terms of an exhaustive list, but in terms of the components, again, that Southwest entertained, again, moving into that first tier of water shortage where you are pushing especially on discretionary uses and again, on low efficiency uses. So again, these are the examples that they had in terms of their district. And if we look at our district, which has somewhat different use, although not entirely different use than parts of Southwest. So again, looking at the landscape recreation and commercial and making sure that that type of irrigation is really being minimized, deferring non-essential uses, and again, thinking of car washes and things like that in the absence of recirculatory or reclamation systems for the water there. You would want to limit that to what's necessary. Obviously, we want people to be able to see the fire trucks. If you're working out, if you have a mining operation and you need people to be able to see safely to operate the vehicle, you would still do that, but you would minimize aesthetic car washing and things like that. Water-intensive activities, pressure washing, things like that. Again, if you're doing construction or maintenance, as some of us are trying to do right now to make sure the building can withstand a future storm, that would be allowed to continue. But if you're just looking at an aesthetic cleanup of your sidewalk, again, you'd look to be deferring that to some time when there's a surplus of water in the aquifer. In terms of regulatory, again, there would be looking at high-pressure or less efficient irrigation methods would be something that we could talk about. That wouldn't be saying that you can't use it, but certainly you would want those to be used when irrigation losses to evaporation using those inefficient methods would be minimized. The frequency of landscape irrigation, or again, asking people to turn off their irrigation system entirely or doing what's just necessary, but maybe maintaining that irrigation restriction to 1 day a week for the rest of people in terms of their turf grass. Establishment of new plants, again, if we can defer that until when we get rainfall again versus using all that watering establishment right now. And for sure, asking people not to use water for aesthetic fountains and things like that during this time frame.
Sounds like a drop in the bucket.
It is the first tier. The other bit that we would be looking to do, again, would be to engage with our commercial, industrial, institutional permittees to see if we did have to advance to a higher phase. Again, as soon as you're advancing to that higher phase, you would be looking at things that have potential economic consequences or being guided to be mindful of them and also to distribute them. And so that's the type of conversation that we might need to start to have as soon as we move into a regulatory order is what, if conditions don't improve, then what would be the next phase and what is possible in terms of the asks of these different water users.
And I guess our neighbor has already implemented phase 2.
So the Southwest District has implemented a phase 2. The St. John's District is moving into their phase 1 or their advisory. Again, one of the time points that both us and St. John's share is that in March, in the absence of some change or intervention, the 2 day per week irrigation is potentially what we would be shifting to, again, just because of the daylight savings. So that's one of the motivations for having this conversation this month, and we would certainly be coordinating with our partners, especially because there are counties that we share across boundaries. And so whatever we do, we would want to be discussing also in coordination with the other districts. That all takes time as well, as we're getting this information in front of you now, and also posing the question as to whether this is something that we should be preparing for in March, or whether this is something that we want to wait and see what March's conditions look like, keeping in mind, you could see a dramatic change. If we get that little bit of supplemental rainfall, then we may be in much the same place next month as we are this month. That's something that we don't know where we'll be by next month.
Madam Chair, Amy, at a minimum for March, would you suggest that we remain or we be consistent with Swift Mud and continuing with a 1 time per week recommendation for landscape irrigation? That is a very small amount of our water use in this district, but it is a use. And as a minimum, even if we didn't go to a phase 2 in March, that's something that we could modify the existing phase that we're in to incorporate continuing.
I think, and I'll defer to council on this, I think if we do anything that involves further regulations to the public, we would need to follow at least what is a phase 2 in terms of the process. We would have a hearing at the board meeting. We would allow people to come and discuss whatever potential regulations would come into effect. And so in terms of the process we would need to follow, if it's anything other than advisory, we would need to follow the steps that are listed in that rule. And
I agree. I think that's right. Now, that phase 2 can be limited to just that, or it can have other things. Yeah, you'd have to go through phase 2.
So pretty much, if it got to the point where we felt like we needed to up our regulation, it'd be a month getting that in place.
it is possible to hold a hearing or to take action in between board meetings.
Emergency meeting.
An emergency meeting could be held, but as a general practice, I think the earliest that it would come to you would be in March, in the absence of a decision that we need to take an emergency action. And again, keep in mind, if it is the lawn irrigation that we're thinking about, that change would not occur until after the March meeting. And again, that was some of the motivation of having this conversation now, even though we're not close to where we were in 11-12. But we are looking at something where if conditions don't improve, or if we don't get the supplemental rainfall in the next several months, we could see a degradation. And that's where thinking of that planning, and again, I think maybe one of the questions is, do we prepare in case in March we're looking at a situation where we would be wanting to move to an advisory, in which case we would be putting that material together with a recommendation. And then again, we monitor the hydrologic conditions continuously. If something would come between then that would change that recommendation, that's a decision that we could make in March.
What is the pleasure of the board? Do we do some preemptive preparation at this time, or wait and see what March looks like?
Doesn't phase 1 ask them to limit anyway?
Phase 1 is voluntary, and it does ask everyone to limit their water use. That is continuing. I don't think there's any scenario until our aquifer conditions improve where we wouldn't be asking people to reduce their water use. I think the question is, would we be contemplating potentially moving to a regulatory phase in March? And again, some of the things that are not high volume, but they're the most discretionary uses that we have in our district and the least potential to have kind of across-the-board economic impacts, considering the sources that we have limited alternative water supplies throughout our district. And so really anything that we can defer or limit in terms of water use right now helps until such time as we get sufficient rainfall.
Madam Chair. Amy, is the city of Gainesville on any kind of water restriction for irrigation now?
So in the entire partnership, which our district and also this Region 1 of St. John's has the same 1 day per week irrigation through through standard time. As we move into daylight savings time for both us and for the St. John's district, that moves to 2 days a week irrigation. And so that would be, again, if we are looking at this conversation, we would also be having the conversation with our partners in the North Florida planning region as it relates to that area.
Well, and Hugh made the comment, I mean, I don't want to belittle the fact that every drop counts right now. So I'm not even suggesting that it's not going to help, but, you know, with our relatively rural environment, numbers of people that live in our area, water conservation from lawn irrigation or landscape irrigation seems like a minimal thing. Now, if we were in, you know, Tampa, Orlando, wherever, where you got just subdivision after subdivision after subdivision, every one of those limiting 25 gallons a day makes a big deal.
Yeah, so Alachua is a split county, but for rural or for an unincorporated Alachua, the St. John's district has delegated that to the Suwannee district. So for unincorporated Alachua County and for our portion of Alachua County, which does start to have some of the subdivisions that you're talking about as you're seeing that growth come in, the regulations in the Suwannee district would prevail there. Within the city limits, that would be the St. John's district. And again, if we were looking at something like this, we would be working to coordinate with the St. John's district.
Madam Chair, I have a suggestion too. The municipalities could probably lessen the hydrant testing and things like that, where they run the water off through the fire hydrants. I mean, it's something that has to be done for your ISO ratings, but you limit the run period of the testing of the hydrants or, don't do quite as many a week, because we still have to make sure that hydrants work. So all municipalities do that, and there's a lot of water that's not gonna go right back into the aquifer that fast, because it's in a ditch, but, that's something I'm gonna look into personally here in Live Oak to make sure. We have a really good schedule here, but it's something that if we got to phase 2, I would definitely work on it with my fire department to limit the use and the runtime. So we do our part.
Which I think, Mr. Sessions, is really what our recommendations are in here, is for a community or city to give consideration to where can they make improvements with that.
And then we could, so.
I think we're trying to balance making the right decision with the right sound data, which is difficult. I mean, just can't speak for anybody else, but for myself, to get my head around what the right decision is. It feels like pressure's coming to do something, right? And so how do you balance, pacing that without an overreaction that can impact our public before it's necessary, or maybe it is necessary if we're, like you said, we can't see forward, so.
With the benefit of foresight, I'm sure that in 11 and 12, they would have liked to know what was coming, because it might have tempered the decision that was made, because you had a major recharge event that was coming. That's the challenge, right, is we don't, other than the forecasts, which, above average temperature, below average rainfall, but we've all seen that those are just forecasts, and that there's weather patterns that can hit that aren't tidally within those. And so it's challenging. And I think that's where my recommendation would be, that we prepare and we look at the conditions and see whether that warrants advancing to the next phase or not. But certainly, I understand the impact that having additional regulations could have on the regulated public. And that's where I think the first measures would be focused mostly on discretionary and less efficient uses. Again, trying to push everybody to make sure they're using things as efficiently as possible.
Madam Chair, to your question a while ago, my personal feeling is that I think the district has their finger on the pulse a lot more than this board does. And if they see in the course of the next, 30 days that stiffer action needs to take place, that they'll come to us with a recommendation to do so. And I feel certain that we'll take that action at that point. Personally, I don't think we need to get too knee-jerky right now and try to implement any further advisories or further regulation. And that's based historically on what's happened in the past for me. Things could get bad, but they could also not be as bad.
I agree with that, okay.
It's interesting, we do live in a pretty wonderful place that does have, relatively speaking, did I hear the 8th lowest rainfall on record last year, and it was still 43 inches. We're blessed that we still have gotten quite a bit of rain, but it's kind of amazing how, as the water flows through the hydrology of this area, how big of an impact it can have on the surface water flows and the groundwater.
And I appreciate the fact that we see what this looks like now. Real possibility that would be before us next month. But, I suppose the counties, I haven't heard anything in my county, I want to say, about restrictions. I've had people ask me personally about it, but in phase 1, I mean, they may know we're in a phase 1, but they don't know what phase 1 means. Maybe the counties could do a little more to get the word out for us.
That is certainly something that, again, as we're pushing the messaging and working with Troy on getting that information out, any avenues that we can use. And that is a part of what we could look at, moving into, or even continuing this phase, would be to reach out to the counties and ask for their assistance and, because they engage with their own citizens and their.
I would highly recommend that as we move toward this, that we spend this time, get the counties involved, let them know they are partners in this, not sit back and let us do it. Get all the help we can get.
And I think the awareness of where we are at and what our water conditions are at this point. I think someone earlier made the comment about, a lot of people realize that it is dry for a lot of reasons, but, from a landscape perspective, they're not generally using a lot of water right now in that regard. And so as we move into warmer conditions, that may change. But I think the awareness of it and the connectivity to our springs and river systems with that is certainly part of our messaging and making people aware of that. But Troy's doing a great job with that. All of our staff are, as they're conducting meetings or interfacing with others, making people aware of those conditions where we're at.
Very good discussion. This information here is very helpful to go back over and review. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? None? Is there any other item that we're all done with? Okay, with our workshop. Is there a motion to adjourn our workshop?
Make that motion, Madam Chair.
Second.
Motion has been made in a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, like sign. Motion carried.
Don't be running really
All righty.
long sprinklers, Tommy.
Robin?